Do you agree with former New York Fed President Bill Dudley?
Well, on certain points, yes. And I guess everybody seems to agree that we're going to have a 25 basis point cut tomorrow. So I guess the most exciting thing to watch will be to see who's going to be at the meeting and not what they do, right?
Yeah.
I think, in terms of dissents, we actually could see a little bit more of difference in opinions. And, if Stephen Myron is going to participate in the meeting, he may actually dissent on the dovish side in favor of cutting rates even more than 25 basis points. Or we could see a hawkish dissent. That is quite possible. I think, the previous summary of economic projections showed 3.5% forecast for core PCE this year. So if some of these participants still think that inflation is going to rise as much, they may also dissent on the hawkish side. So it will be definitely a very interesting meeting, and we will see how many cuts they will price in. I totally agree with Bill Dudley that that is probably going to be the most interesting thing, to see how many cuts are in the dot plot.
Well, let's take a step back and just want to get from you your view of the U.S. economy right now. Carol and I have spent quite a bit of time over the last few weeks talking about the tension between the Fed's dual mandates when it comes to stable prices and maximum employment, given the cracks that are starting to show in the labor market. What do you think is more important for the Fed to focus on at tomorrow's meeting and then toward the end of the year?
Totally. I think that's exactly the thing that we are watching. So now the mandate is pretty tricky to follow, right? So there are the two goals are in conflict. And we actually think that inflation will rise. We think that inflation will rise above 3% in terms of PCE towards the end of the year due to tariffs. But we also see a significant slowdown in economic growth. The economy has already slowed quite significantly in the first half of the year. Growth really fell below 2% if you average it up Q1 and Q2. So don't be fooled by 3.3% GDP growth in the second quarter. So it's due to gyrations in imports ahead of tariffs. So, and we do see that the economy will slow further in the second half of the year, below 1%, quite frankly. So we spent quite a lot of time.
So Yelena, stagflation or recession, or how are you potentially seeing it?
It's these words are very dramatic. We don't, expect either. So stagflation is really inflation getting out of hand and inflation expectations getting out of hand. We don't project that. So we do see a pickup in inflation and slowdown in economic growth, but not to such a degree that also we forecast a recession. No, we do think that there will be a significant slowdown, but growth will probably remain positive. And that will be very tricky to read in economic data.
One of the things I'm just curious is, President Donald Trump, even today, predicted a big cut from the Federal Reserve this week ahead of the meeting. And we know he has been, for a while, since he really came into the White House for this second term, talking a lot about the Fed, the composition of the Fed, what Jay Powell should be doing. Is that input from the president, how is it maybe impacting, or maybe more so politicizing, the U.S. central bank? I know we can say they're not going to be political, but it's hard to kind of ignore all of that's been said in the pressure and possibly the changing in the composition as a result of President Trump.
Well, it's a very good point, Carol. And, obviously we all watching what is happening with the Fed and how it affects Fed independence. I think the Fed and each and every participant in that meeting will actually try to make as much effort as they possibly can to really address this in a very nonpartisan, non-political way. Looking at the data, looking at the same data we'll all look at, and just come up with the best possible projection and solution for how they see the economy will evolve. And we have to listen to them and really believe that's what's happening. I think, yes, the recent news are very important because they draw attention to what is happening with the Fed. But what's happening inside of the Fed and at that meeting will be solely focused on the economy. That's what I truly think.